I want to continue on the same train of predictability and especially the impact it has in a complex supply chain like consumer goods. And I wanted to start to introduce myself, and the only reason I'm doing this is so that everybody understands that I am far from a data scientist. Eugene, with your background, it was impressive with all your studies in data science. I'm even far away from a citizen data scientist, which Hightower I know we like to use in our conversations. Maybe consider me a data science fanatic, right? I think it's something I like to follow, I like to stay close to because I realize the importance it has in the industry and supply chain. And with me, I have Amber Johnson here with me and some of her team on the line. So she was a very important part of this project. And I want to make sure that we focus more on what it means to take some of the studies, some of the modeling, and put it into practice. That's going to be the main focus of what I'll speak to today. And I first wanted to go high level. I'm sure many and most of you are familiar with the Anheuser-Busch business and what it's become now. So what you'll see here in the circles are our commercial priorities. And these change very slightly each year, right? It's very simple. 5 simple things we're trying to focus on. The first thing is brands, building winning brands. Everyone's familiar with Bud Light, with Budweiser, with some of our craft portfolio. We want to make sure we can enable those brands to stay competitive in their own space. And what the consumers perceive of those brands is very important to us. Leading in the trade ups. So what you'll see is a lot of opportunities to go to a more premium brand. Consider some of the upselling and pricing that can go on in that category in order to get people to not only commit to the winning brand, but maybe something above it and beyond. Stabilizing the mainstream. So, Budweiser was our flagship. We've expanded upon it to Bud Light. If you go out into the market, into a Schnucks, and you see that there's a Bud Light seltzer tea, right? We've gone very far beyond just that, the Bud Light, but it's still very important. The awareness and the knowledge that the consumer has of those mainstream brands is very, very important and core to our business. Next is beyond beer growth. And what we're seeing now is, and this is not just our own, the beer industry, right? It's everywhere. Is people have their own preference and now they're able to get it. And, me in my profession, when I hear that, that just means more complexity. How am I going to be able to meet everybody's individual demands, everybody's individual interests, their own need states, the target market? This adds a lot of complexity, but we want to make sure that as a company, we're there to meet those, because if we don't meet it, they'll find it somewhere else. And then finally, category growth. So this is the opportunity to expand seltzer from a line extension to its own category. This could be in the spirits world. They're non-alcoholic, where we're trying to support some of these changing shifts in consumer preferences. We want to be the leading company there. And then the bottom here is our support. This is how we enable those commercial priorities, from our culture, from the reputation, data, insights, all very important to us. And then the operational efficiency. And that's sort of where we'll center in on, is how can I enable all these changes with the operations I have at my disposal. And I think, just to make sure to reiterate, right, none of these commercial priorities say anything about SKU rationalization, right? So this is nothing about decomplexity. This is all about adding complexity. And I think that's the exciting part of the things we get to work on. And to continue down that operational stream, I want to highlight how our supply chain works. And this looks pretty familiar to a lot of the other presenters earlier. But one thing to call out, and for those in manufacturing, maybe cover your ears, this is a very push-based system. It's not pull. This is not a just-in-time. This is a push system for all intents and purposes. There's some hybrid approaches we take to some of our SKUs and how we deliver and how we fulfill, but for the most part, it's a push system. And how this operates is we take a 12-week forecast from our wholesalers. And that 12-week forecast is what deems minimum inventory stock, maximum inventory stock at those fulfillment centers that we deliver to retail. So we are taking those 12-week inputs mainly because of the time it takes to produce and ship beer. So a Bud Light takes about 28 days to produce. And there's not really a lot of opportunity to lean that down just because of our processes. So imagine this as a push system, and I want to highlight that 12-week forecast because that's really what we're focused on. So today, Amber and her team are looking 12 weeks out and predicting what we're going to sell of all those SKUs that we've added to our portfolio. Some of our locations are doing upwards of 600, 700 active SKUs per day. and we're trying to predict what they're going to sell in 12 weeks. So Amber's team is going and looking at each individual SKU for the next 12 weeks and trying to guess, right? And they have inputs. They have a lot of inputs at their disposal. They have local market leaders. They have previous data, but that takes time. We estimate maybe a minute per SKU, right? So a minute times 600 minutes, we don't really have that in a week in order to look at 20 different markets that we'll speak to. So obviously there's opportunity to reduce, to improve, and find more time rather than data entry, but in data analytics. I think oh no, this works. So that 12-week forecast, we use two pretty high-level metrics in order to measure our success. The first one is forecast accuracy. You can see the math equation, but essentially this is just how close was I to what was actually sold in terms of volume. So if I predicted we were going to sell 100 units in week 5 and I sold 90, I'd be 90% accurate. If I predicted 100 and we sold 110, I would still be 90% accurate. The next measure is bias, and bias is a good indicator of if we are over our estimate or under. So in that 110 example, we essentially under forecasted, so we actually be a negative 10% bias versus what was actually to be sold. For our model, our success criteria was on that forecast accuracy. So we'll speak a lot to percentages out of 100, with 100 being I was exactly perfect to what I predicted I was going to sell. And how we, to go a little bit backwards to the comment on analytics, it's a journey, right? And it's moving quick. If you look at the far left of this graphic here, this is just figuring out what's going on. Do I have information, right? And what we're trying to do is move further to the right, where we're moving beyond just descriptive analytics to more towards the predictive and prescriptive. And predictive to us, right, is can I guess what's going to happen and then take actions in order to change it, maybe for the better or to mitigate what could happen. And prescriptive for us is getting to the point where the system is able to make the decisions and not say, I could see this upcoming price promotion. Maybe you should think about, adjusting up or down. It's going to go and do it for us, right? That's where we like to get there, is less of the looking at the data, but the back end is doing all the prescriptive and descriptive information for us. So one thing we learned before we could go on this machine learning journey, right, the hot buzzword, is that you can't improve upon something that's very fragmented. You need a strong base. You need sustainability before you can go and implement these sort of transformation of processes, of people, of systems. So what we did first is we took these 20 locations that had their own individual forecasters. So each site had somebody that worked on their territory and said, I'm going to look at the next 12 weeks. Every single week, I'm going to look at the next 12 weeks for all of my SKUs and predict what's happening. We brought them all to St. Louis. And there's a trade-off there, right? Where you have somebody that's local in the market, they get to see the retailer, they get to see the people, and they have a pretty close relationship in order to make good decisions. Fair, but it becomes very tribal knowledge, right? Is if that person leaves, we're back at square one, right? We have to start all over again and figure out those relationships, what sort of trends, even just knowing the weather, right, is sometimes something you have to figure out as you come in. So we took all of them and put them in St. Louis, which enabled very close visibility to the centralized teams that did production planning, that did shipment planning. We had those forecasters right next to those people. And it's a lot easier to make those best practices happen. Maybe somebody is very good at working with the retail chains and understanding how their pricing works, and they can share that to the person next to them that's forecasting for a different region. And then finally, working on more solidified routines. It's a major part of our business is structure and management systems. And when you have good routines, you can hold teams accountable for sharing information. You can have stronger KPI and PI measurements. And that's where it came in together, that we had a centralized team, again, led by Amber. We called our LIFT team, Logistics, Inventory, and Forecasting. So from there, right, we have a solid base. We have the right people, we have the right processes. Let's bring the technology in. And how the system essentially works is they are fed into their 12-week forecast, a time series model predicting each of those SKUs. So they're not starting from zero, right? They have a value that they are allowed to work with. They can modify up, down, or accept the long-term modeling. But where we wanted to explore more with machine learning was being able to use that 12-week forecast and actually apply more opportunities to find what's in the data. And that's really what machine learning provided for us. we were able to take in, innumerable variables or features into the system in order to see what really matters. And what really matters by location, rather than taking this long-term forecast by state or by region or by country, we can now go to individual markets and use the power of computing to get more detail out. So we were going through some feature sets, and we were testing things like Twitter sentiment analysis in Canton, Ohio, right? I can see that information. I can feed that in. In the end, it doesn't matter, if you guys are wondering. Not enough tweets in Canton, Ohio. But we can see those sort of things, and we can test and trial and make those adjustments very quickly. And I know Andrea mentioned the need to update those models, and we could do that now versus the previous time series models. We could test, we could trial, and we could update those individual features and opportunities for trialing new algorithms. In the end, some of the most important ones turned out to be the ones you could probably imagine: previous week's sales, last year's sales, weather, and the like, alongside pricing, promotions, and things like that. So taking some of the models into play and testing, right? We started with a small subset of our some of our fulfillment centers and saw some immediate lifts, right? What you'll see here is WAMP. So this is weighted average market price. Different sort of subsets of our products. In Canton specifically, so bringing that, saw some major lifts. Tulsa, Oklahoma as well, in the premium segment. So this is our segment that's focused on craft and sort of the higher end. And then breaking apart Canton, Ohio, I just want to show some of these. You'll see some examples maybe of overfitting in some of these that we had to go back to the algorithm and make sure we're not overfitting for the territory. And Beyond Beer especially, so this is our innovations, which is a very challenging thing to forecast, is what's this innovation going to do in this market, as well as super premium, so some of our higher end crafts where you don't see a ton of success, right? Still very low accuracy, but any sort of improvement makes a major difference in these portfolios for delivering. And then a little bit of formatting change here. I think I had some Anheuser-Busch fonts in there, but you can sort of get the idea here is when you come out of the standard forecasting and are able to get that sort of lift, you see two metrics really improve. Beyond forecast accuracy, why does that matter, right? It's either that I didn't have enough product and I couldn't fulfill my retailers, or I had too much, right? In our business, the quality of the product is very important, can go overage very quickly, right? So that's what we would call supply chain loss. And then service level for us is a little bit different. We use it as a miss, right? So 100% would be, we didn't deliver anything, 0 would be perfect, no misses. But you see a good improvement in both sides just from the pilot of our machine learning in that small sample set with significant reduction in supply chain loss. And then finally, where did we go from here? So this was, we were impacted by the pandemic as well, right? So as you're looking at last year's sales, suddenly everything shifted. So as the on-premise closed, the stadiums, the restaurants, the bars, everything closed, right? Everything changed. And while it wasn't quite the run on toilet paper, right? We had the run on a lot of certain packages that really were a shock to us. So we went from, 80% forecast accuracy down to 50, even into the 40s in some of these weeks as we try to figure out what's going on, right? So a little bit of a hold on the project while we managed through the pandemic and supply and just getting product on shelf. But what it turned into is now, rather than just these 20 locations, we're now building machine learning from 0 to 76-week forecasting with some different partners in order to feed all 600 of our different fulfillment centers across the US. So we've taken this as a chance to pilot in order to expand and use the data beyond the pilot. So very exciting things to come from the projects. At the time when the pandemic hit, we were doing about 50% acceptance of the machine learned model. And I think I wish I had a slide on takeaways here, but what Amber did and led was really transitioning from a data scientist who's helping us write these algorithms to the people who are doing the forecasting, right? How do I get them to use the tool? How can I make it useful to them to actually reduce that time to forecast from a minute to SKU down to 10, 15 seconds per SKU, which gives them the chance to investigate innovations, have those communications at a local level, that sort of thing. So either way, very successful. This is a project that's stemmed into things much greater than it. So very exciting. And that's it. I try to go quick, waiting for lunch. So Pause for questions. Oh, nice.
Hi, as an alternative to forecast accuracy, have you looked at all at end-to-end inventory planning and the possibility of using supply chain metrics to evaluate the process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Especially since we use our forecast accuracy in managing inventory levels, right? The more accurate they are, the less safety stock you need. So absolutely, you could see some changes in product on hand, product in warehouse, which obviously reduces our core working capital, which is a major benefit to us as well, because of that push system and the need for holding inventory at site. So absolutely, something like a core working capital inventory on hand, as well as some of the lagging indicators like we mentioned, service level, out of stocks, or other sort of ways to measure customer satisfaction. Absolutely.
Question about forecasting and the overall process. So there's a lot of behaviors in that process driven by historic incentive programs in most companies. So how are you using this to alter the way you incentivize your people? Because historically, forecasting accuracy is heavily impacted by that.
Yeah, and some of these regulations, state regulations, kind of guide our pricing and promotion strategies and how we go and actually make the sale to retailer. And so that's where I mentioned Amber bringing in an integration process where we might not be accepting in full the machine learning process. We're able to say, here's the baseline. We can take in some factors like the incentives, the local teams, in order to enrich the forecast is how we sort of envision it. So great question.